Hello everyone. Today I wanted to go over the bypass valve for our 2.0 LTG turbo engines and a couple of the modifications that we can do to them, and go over a couple little products that I have here. And what we have up here is a stock diverter valve that I just took out of the car, which I'm going to take that apart in a minute for you. And I have two products here that's kind of under contention right now on the forums, but I had to go buy them both because I need to know for myself as to what they can do and if they actually do anything. But first one we have here, this is the JacFab valve, which is now being sold by a company called BNR, and I got one of the original JacFab valves that I've been running this on my car for probably a little over a year and a half now with no issues. So so far I'm pretty pleased with it. But recently this came out from Go Fast Bits, and this is their diverter valve. Just got it in the mail today, so I'm anxious to try it out and see what happens. As for trying to test for results, I have the HP Tuner Suite, and I'm going to be running a scanner. I'm going to try to do 2 runs a piece, 2 with the stock, 2 with the JacFab valve, and then 2 with the Go Fast Bits valve, and see what we come up with. Alright, so for starters, let's show you how to install these, and I'm going to rip the stock valve apart. So what I did here, I kind of pre-broke down the stock diverter valve in order to be able to hold the camera with one hand, but I want to show you how this works. This is your stock valve. What it is, this plastic face seals against the inner housing of the compressor section of your turbo, and this is what helps monitor your boost. And it's got an electric solenoid on the back here that will actuate this plunger in and out in order to monitor the correct amount of boost to your car that the computer desires. So how this works, this plunger pulls out. You have the little spring in here. We'll save that. This piece pops off, and this can be a little tricky to get out. But what seals this plunger to the inside of the valve here is this little plastic O-ring. And I think this is what these other 2 products are trying to solve, because everybody's saying that these can leak. Like I said, big area of contention, but we'll see what happens whenever we get the results back. So anyway, we're going to set that aside. There is also a little rubber O-ring here. We're going to reuse this, at least for the JacFab valve. I'm going to show you how that one goes on first. So we're going to put this back on here. And how the JacFab valve works, this is a little piggyback system that just clips into this housing. You put the spring back on, like so, and then on the bottom here, there's this little pinhole. You got to line that up on this part of the stock bypass valve. And this goes like this, and then it just snaps in place. It just snaps in place. There we go. And then this is supposed to seal against the housing of your turbo. So you'll notice here, he's got a big, thick rubber O-ring here on the front, and we got a little thin one here on the top, and this is supposed to make a better seal, thus enabling it to build boost sooner and hold boost longer, in theory. Honestly, though, I've had it for a long time. I really liked it. And it's a very well-built unit. You can see it's all nicely machined. He's got his letters and everything on there. All I know is the car feels better with this on. Actually, I just did a run with the stock valve back on, and it definitely feels like it lost a little bit. So we're going to set this aside, and we're going to show you how the other one works. Okay, I had to go look at the directions for a minute, see how this one goes together, but here we have our factory O-ring, which will go back on the face of our stock unit here, followed by, they give you a new spring. Oh, it's getting a little anxious to go together. That goes like that, and then we have this little plunger assembly. And we got an O-ring, looks like on the bottom here, and then we got one on the top. This goes in like that. Okay, now next we take this housing, and it's got a cutout that rides on the pin right here, and this will hopefully snap right together. It looks like this new plunger assembly seals against the bottom of the inside there, so I'm curious to see how that works. Okay, Now I'm going to have to push that together by hand, but how the rest of it goes together here is you take this spring, this goes in the top there, and then you take the plunge, it's got a little weight to it. Then you take this plunger, and then that goes in the top here, and then the whole assembly is complete. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the camera down for a minute. I'm going to push this all together, and then we'll take another look at it. I want to throw a little bit of lubricant on side this too. So, all right, give me a minute. Let me put this together, and we'll see what we got. All right, so right away I see something that poses a little bit of a difficulty over the JacFab valve. The JacFab valve, whenever you push it onto the stock solenoid, it snaps in place. This one does not, so I'm kind of holding it together. That's going to make it a little bit difficult when trying to reassemble. Also, I notice on the top it doesn't have the detent like the JacFab valve does right there on top, that little nipple on his unit. But yet, there's 3 bolts holding on it, so I don't see how you can clock it improperly. Another thing I'm looking at, it looks like it seats a little bit lower on top of the valve there. So I'm wondering if, I don't think that's going to pose a problem. I assume they measured everything right. We're going to put it on the car. We'll see what happens. But there's a spring on the inside here. And I'm hoping that's going to put enough tension on, because it seems like there's a lot of movement left on this piston. So I'm going to go downstairs. We'll put this all together into the car and see how it works. We're out here at the car. We're getting ready to bolt up the new unit, and I have to say there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this one-handed. It's going to be difficult even 2 hands, because I got to hold the whole unit together to keep that O-ring, keeping the go-fast bits part from the stock solenoid from falling apart. So it still uses the same T30 Torx bit, and they give you 3 new bolts here. And here's the housing. Let's see if I get the camera down here. And you see that little inner ring, that's where this is going to be sealing on. So let me put you guys down. I'm going to see if I could bolt this up, and then we're going to go for some test runs and see how it works out. Now, one assembly note I was looking at is I'm wondering if this has to completely seal against the inside of the compressor housing, the turbo. Because if you look with the spring that this thing came with, this doesn't sit very high inside this housing, and when I push it into the hole of the compressor section, either this is barely touching or it is not. So I'm curious to see if I might have to put a washer or 2 on the end of this to make this work. But for now, I'm going to throw it together the way it sits and just see how it performs. From when I looked at their website, whenever air goes in this hole, this piston blows out, and that's what actually seals against the compressor housing. But then if that's the case, then why do we even have a spring? So I don't know, I'm going to throw it together and see how it performs. Alright, so I was able to sandwich it all together and get it all manhandled in. I was able to use my T30 Torx bit here on a 1/4-inch drive socket wrench and the old calibrated elbow to get it all snugged up. Last thing to do here is take our plug, push this guy back on. There's that, and then click that back on. We're ready to go take it for a rip. I already got the laptop inside the car. HP Tuners is all hooked up. Let's get a couple runs in and see how, see if it goes on our success reel or our bloopers list. All right, so it's a week later. I've been testing out both of these valves, and I gathered some data. And I'll sit down here and I'll show you what all I got. Now, when I did HP Tuners I want to say that was last Sunday, I did 2 runs apiece, which each valve. I did the stock valve, JacFab valve, and the GFB valve. Now, because it's so easy to change the valve on this, because I got a cold air intake on it, I was able to do all of these runs within an hour and a half of install, from the stock valve to the very last runs on the GFB valve. So the numbers here, they're kind of interesting. Honestly, I kind of really close to what I expected. But the stock valve, for run 1 going down the highway away from my place. I had a max torque of 330 and 318 horsepower. Run 2 was 330 and 326. Run 2 is on the way back. So that's why run 2s are more consistent with each other than run 1s. The BNR JacFab valve was 325 and 315, run 1. Run 2, 324 and 327. The Go Fast Bits valve was 324 and 317, 326 and 327. Now, what's interesting, all of these are within like 5 horsepower and 5 foot-pounds of torque on each other, so the gains are negligible. But if you read what these valves are supposed to do, they're not supposed to give you a horsepower gain. They're supposed to help you change your torque curves and build power differently. So what I mean by that is I could go into detail about how both of these valves feel inside the car. The JacFab valve, that's actually inside the car right now. I'm still playing with that. I'm doing a couple little modifications to it to see if I get it to build boost a little bit faster without getting the compressor surge. But the JacFab valve, that likes to build boost very early off of idle. And I've even tried the JacFab valve with the Go Fast Bit spring, because the Go Fast Bit spring's a little bit heavier. However, when running the JacFab valve with that heavier spring, it doesn't open fast enough, and I get a little bit of flutter out of the turbocharger in a service vehicle soon light. But with the stock spring, I don't get that flutter. Now, the Go Fast Bits valve, I ran this for about a week, and stock, I mean, it was okay. I really didn't notice anything change from the Go Fast Bits valve, except I kept stalling my car out, and I almost never do that. And yes, it is a manual vehicle, so the automatic guys would probably like this one a little bit better than I did. But it takes a little bit for it to build boost off of idle. Now, remember how I said earlier, whenever you put that spring in there and it seems like this piston doesn't sit the whole way against the inside of the compressor housing? That's because it doesn't. As soon as you start making boost, it goes through that hole and it blasts this piston out. So what I did, you'll see I got a little washer here. This is not part of their kit. What I did is I put this washer in here and I shimmed the valve up and ran it like that for a week. Now the car ran great with that on it, and going from one shift to the next, the car really liked it. But I was getting a lot of flutter out of the turbocharger, so I took it off because I kept getting the service vehicle soon light. I do like the JacFab valve for drivability. My car seems to like it, and I get no check engine lights with the stock spring in it. This one, the car runs a little bit less off. Let me see how I want to word this. It doesn't build boost as fast off of idle. But going from one shift to the next, there's plenty of power, and it seems like to have it a little bit more top end than this valve. So, I guess now that I think about it, since I've done all these runs and been playing with them for a week, if I were to pick a valve for drivability and everyday use, I would like the JacFab valve. If I'm going to be racing and do an autocross, I'd probably like the Go Fast Bits valve. Also, if I had an automatic, I think I'd be a little bit happier with this. But take my opinion for what it's worth, and let me know if you have any thoughts or comments on it. And if there's any other configurations you think that I could run to try to answer some questions, let me know. But other than that, have a good day. We'll see you around.